Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining one more time as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this afternoon, we are going to look at the concept that have Jamaicans been, disappointed, or are they disappointed in the politics in Jamaica? Are Jamaicans now giving up on politics? Jamaicans say no more JLP, no more PNP. That is the whole question, that people seem not to be that interested in politics anymore. We still have our diehards there, and there are people who will kill themselves over their party leaders and the party itself because they are fanatics. They belong to a cult. But when you look at what is happening in Jamaica in terms of voter apathy, it is something that we have to pay close attention to. Now, can we run a society based on just winning elections and not based on the policy platforms that are launched by our different political parties? We find that our people are not very educated about the political climate. The media houses are not diffusing information that would help our people to understand what is happening. For example, when Martin Henry was alive, and we miss him dearly, he would religiously follow the manifestos in terms of looking at the achievements of or parties. So when the incumbent, whether the PNP or the JLP, he would look at what they said in their manifestos and what they would have accomplished according to them in the first 100 days, and he would dissect if that were true. That is what he would religiously do, Martin Henry, who was one of Jamaica's finest journalists that we've ever produced. I don't think there is one comparable to him in terms of the content of the articles he would produce, and also the fact that he was, he adhered to objectivity. He tried as much as possible to have been fair and to have been objective, and he stuck with the facts. What we are doing now in Jamaica, we are like the Americans. We have divided ourselves into different political groups. So we have, like you have in the United States, the liberal media, which belongs to the Democratic Party, or which belong, because we have several media houses there, which dedicates to the NSNBCs and the MSNBCs and the CNNs. And you have, on the other hand, you have that segment of the political tribes that belong to the conservative group. So you have the Fox News and other conservative media houses, which are in the United States. So since 2008, we have followed that too. We have been following that trend where the Gleaner tends to align itself more with PNP party propaganda, while the Jamaica Observer tend to align themselves with the likes of the JLP. We know that, of course, the owner of the Observer was George, not Bush, but Butch Stewart, rather. Butch Stewart, and I'm sure his son, he's now deceased. Butch Stewart is now deceased, so his son is the one who is running that show. However, let's begin with something here that came from Lisa Hannah. And I think this was posted on her X, former Twitter. And let me see if I can share this document with you, what she's saying here on X. And I think it was published last year, but it was, something very still relevant, what she was saying at the time, that still bears truth in our time. All right. Now we have here Lisa Hannah. This is her X. Over the last 4 terms, neither the PNP nor the JLP should be celebrating. Both parties have been unable to persuade the Jamaican majority to vote for them. Specifically, less than 1 in 4 persons have given neither a PNP or JLP government the mandate to run Jamaica. Just over 1/4 of registered voters voted in the 2024 local government elections, 29.6%. In our 2020 general elections, it was 37.8%. So we can see that the numbers are decreasing as the years go by. People are losing hope in the political environment, in the political process. In the general election of 2007 and 2016, the difference in the number of Jamaicans who voted for either the PNP or the PNP, the JLP or the PNP, was less than 1%. Let me repeat that. In the GE, the general election of 2007 and 2016, the difference in the number of Jamaicans who voted for either the JLP or the PNP was less than 1%. In 2011, the difference was 6.7%. If we take our focus away from the number of seats won by either the JLP or the PNP, the popular vote count tells a whole different story. 2020, JLP 408,292, PNP 306,034 margin. We have 102,258. Now, 2016 JLP 436,000, and we have PNP 433,000. 2011 405. So we can see there where the people are not necessarily interested, because remember, we have a population of approximately 3 million people. And these are the people who are, it seems to me, turning out to vote. So this is what the whole question of democracy, as we suggest, entails. I think people are losing hope and confidence and trust, implicit trust in the political parties that form what we call our democracies. Now, if people are losing trust and they no longer believe in government, and we need government because if there's no government, we have anarchy, what is going to happen? What is the future of our society if people have lost hope in government and governance? The question we need to ask ourselves, however, is why? Why have they lost, or why are they losing hope and faith in the political process? Why? And this is what the journalists should be tasked with doing, but they're not doing that. Instead, they prefer to just say the he says, she says, and nobody does any critical analyses of the Jamaican society. All right. Now, the RGR group, it was also published in the Jamaica Gleaner this week, suggests here that Jamaica, and this was published on Wednesday, June 18th, 2025. So this was just day before yesterday. I'm actually making this video today, which is June 20th. So Jamaicans stick to party lines in assessment of government's performance. Okay, so listen to what the article is suggesting here. Just months before the next parliamentary election is due, nearly 1 in 3 Jamaicans say they cannot identify a single area they believe the Dr. Andrew Holness administration has excelled in since 2020. 1 in every 3 Jamaicans have intimated that they cannot identify a single area they believe the Dr. Andrew Holness administration has excelled in since 2020. They're not seeing it. Now, these are the people who have to deal with the consequences of Dr. Andrew Holness's policies. At the same time, roughly 1 in 4 could not single out any area they believe the government has mismanaged. So while they can't see anything that he has improved in, yet still they can't identify anything that he has managed, that he has mismanaged. Now, you really wonder how informed are Jamaican people, right? They can perhaps see what is happening, but they do not have the information available to intelligently articulate their sentiments. And so a lot of times when these polls are done, because of the linguistic challenges that Jamaicans face, and it's not just about speaking Creole, because what is happening, because there is no formal education in the Jamaican Creole, there's no formal access to knowledge, then they can't really express themselves because they're not reading, right? And they just listen to what perhaps they hear on TVJ and CVM and what people and from the Star, okay? But they cannot explain with any level of profundity the challenges and the intractable problems that we face as a society, and hence the challenge that we have there. Now, whether or not we are going to deal with the challenges of language that we face in Jamaica is another story. I have already uploaded videos on the fact that we need English as a language, as a national language, so that we can also be a part of this global community, because English is the language of globalization. And if we are not mastered, if we have not mastered the language of globalization and technology, it means therefore that we are going to be forever left behind. I don't want to hear anything about Africa, because Africa is left behind too as a continent. A few countries there are doing well. So we can't begin to compare ourselves with Africa. Yes, we can acknowledge our African, descent and the fact that our foreparents were strong and they stood up, but we are in a different social and economic environment, and we have to adapt to the environment in which we find ourselves. And I think that we're still having this delusional, we still have delusional thoughts that we are going to go back to Africa. This hello, Mother Africa, how are you? And we begin to sing and dance. But at the end of the day, after the dancing has been done, we are still left with the reality. Okay, so let's continue with the findings coming from the polls and articulated here on the RJR's website. The findings are from the latest RGR Gleaner commissioned Don Anderson poll conducted between May 18th and June 7th. Mr. Anderson, who is head of Market Research Services, said the responses highlight the absence of objectivity and instead are falling in line behind their support for respective parties in assessing the worth of many of the issues raised in the poll. So what they have, as Mr. Anderson is suggesting here, is that Jamaicans tend to just be loyal to their party for no reason. Just in the same way when the PNP voters were there protesting against the appointment of Dennis Chung, right, as the financial director or the technical director of the FID, the Federal Investigations Division, many of them, the large majority of these protesters, PNP protesters, did not know what they were protesting against or about. They had no clue, but they were just bussed. And according to Garfield Higgins, they were bussed and staged. Okay? It was all for stage. It was acting as if they're against the JLP government, and they don't know. And we can say the same thing about the JLP. When you make points against the government, the incumbent government, we cannot talk about 18 years of the PNP in office since, in the 1990s to the early 2000s. We have to understand that the JLP has been in government from 2007. They had a hiatus in 2011 to 2016. And since that time, they have been in power again. So they have been in power since the 21st century for some times too. Okay? Andrew Holness is running for his third consecutive term in office. We have to contextualize this reality. What does that mean for the future of Jamaica? PJ Patterson did that, and we saw where it was just a bag of corruption. We can't allow them to stay in office that long because money and power corrupt. Okay, of the 1,033 participants aged 18 years or older, 29.2% said nothing, don't know, or not sure when asked what they would say the government has done well during its term of office since 2020. So they're just saying nothing, don't know, or not sure. Not able to express themselves. The people in Jamaica are not able to express themselves when it comes on to expressing themselves formally. This is a massive problem that we face in modern Jamaica. If it is at all modern, I don't think Jamaica is modern. I think that we're living in a very backward society. I have been saying that. I'm not saying that with pride. I am embarrassed. I am embarrassed that at this stage of our development, going now 20, how many years? 23 years this year. 63 years, I beg your pardon. 63 years of independence, at least political independence, because we're not economically, nor, well, I can't even say if we're political independent, because if we're not free economically, then we can't be free politically. Okay? And you're down there talking about constitution reform when we're not even independent. We're not even independent. And talking about the king is head of state, but the king does not run the show. And if you ask the Canadians, when they were threatened by Trump the other day that Trump was going to, is actually planning on making Canada become the 51st state, you know, whether or not that is accomplished, that's another story. But the fact that Trump is threatening the likes of Canada's so-called first world nation, right? And the king went there in the opening of Parliament when, you know, after Mark Carney won the election. And the Canadians were expecting the king to speak to Trump and to give it to him and to let him know that Canada is not up for sale. But did the king do that? Because the king understands that he is also, and his country are under the leadership of the US military-industrial complex. They know that. Britain understands that her days of empire have passed, and the sun has set on her empire. She is also delusional, but the fact of the matter that it has, whether she wants to admit it or not. The US runs the show, and the US runs what is happening in Jamaica. If the US decides that it wants something to more from Jamaica, many times they can't say no. I think 100% of the time they can't say no. And I think we lost fully our sovereignty during the Dulles saga. I've already published videos on that to suggest to you that that was the end. That was the nail in the coffin of Jamaica's sovereignty in terms of how much can we negotiate with the US. Whatever she says she wants, whatever the US wants, Jamaica has to give. Or if they don't give, if they don't, you know, toe the line, then they will be invaded. Right? And that's what we saw. Right? We saw a military invasion. People don't like to think about that. That's what happened. And I don't know, for the likes of me, why Jamaicans ignore. We like to deflect. And we just don't face up to the reality. When you think about the invasion of Panama, people talk about it. Military invasion of Panama. The Dominican Republic, I think twice. Yes, twice. There was a military invasion in the DR. In theirs was 1916, yes, because Haiti's was 1915 and theirs was the year after. And the military stayed here until 1916 to 1924, right? In the DR. Then there was another military invasion in the DR, in the Dominican Republic, in 1963 under Johnson, right? The Johnson's presidency of the United States. And if you go to the Dominican Republic, they keep on telling their people every year they have anniversary against the gringos' military occupation, to keep it in their people's consciousness. And they write books about it at their universities. We don't do that. I doubt if there's any book written at the University of the West Indies about what took place in 2010 during the military incursion. I don't think, and you can correct me, and I stand corrected, if anybody at the University of the West Indies has written a book highlighting what took place and what lessons could have been learned or what lessons we can still learn from that occupation, and how we might have, to some extent, to a great extent, I should say, lost our sovereignty. Okay? So we're still on the thing that the JLP, neither the JLP nor the PNP, and that could be the fact that that's why people are, are showing that voter apathy, because they're sensing that our politicians are not in charge. They don't know why, because they might not have the education and the exposure to understand why our governments don't really have the power that we think they have. That there are other forces behind them who run the show, and that they can go beyond the line of progress than these people want them to go. They don't know. I know, and perhaps some of you there know, but they don't know. So they just say, you know what happened? I don't see anything happening for me. Why should I vote? Okay. Now, that was followed by 19.8% of participants who said improved infrastructure, 10.1% who said increased or improved social benefits, including the program of advancement through health, the PATH, and education and national insurance scheme benefits, 9.2%, cited the government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, and 5.7% pointed to the increase in the income tax threshold. Mr. Anderson said most of the positives identified have to do with improvements to the social fabric of the society. What has been done? Right? What has been done to improve the social fabric of our society? I think our social fabric is decaying, has decayed, and continues to decay without anyone sounding the alarm. So I'm not sure if they just like to live like ghetto people. And did you see what happened this week when KFC decided to have given a 2 pieces special? I don't even know what they were doing. But the raid of Jamaicans to just go and get a free meal was, to me, backward, socially backward. Something is wrong with that society. It's almost like the people never had KFC in their lives before. It was ridiculous, and it was all over social media to see. And I really wonder, and I know it's for views, I really wonder when people look at the images of Jamaica on social media, what do they think of the social fabric of Jamaica? They must think it's a backward country, right? It's a backward country. And when you look at the conditions of our roads where these KFC restaurants were located, it's appalling. And you have these cars and people think, we don't look good. Jamaica does not look good. We have to have civic pride, and we have lost that civic pride. And the lack of civic pride also affects us psychologically and socially. So when people go there and they see unkempt roads, roads that have big, large potholes, it affects your psychology. It affects the level of, what should I say, sophistication of the country. Right? It does. It affects, I don't care how many big houses you want to have in that community. Right? I don't care how many good schools you want to have or how many churches too. You need to have good roads. We need better roads. We need better infrastructure. And the infrastructure in Jamaica has collapsed. I don't know if Andrew Holness, and I'm not blaming him, his government only for the poor infrastructure that we have in Jamaica, because this has been ongoing. However, it is time for him also not to think that what he's doing is great. And he's not doing Jamaicans any favor. It is taxpayers' money that he's using. And we are the ones who have to suffer the pain down of the debt, even though it's not our debt, it's the debt of the elites that we have to pay back. So why not give us some good roads? The elites are making millions and billions of dollars from us, from having enslaved the Jamaican people over the years. And they can't even say, these people have allowed us to have generated large amount of money, large sums of money. Let's build them some good roads. Let's build them some good schools, at least. But to them, no, they will never have you educated, because if you are, then you are going to be a threat to their existence. Okay? So this is a Jamaica that we live in which Jamaicans have lost what should I say now? They have lost um faith, confidence, hope in the political process of Jamaica. PNP or JLP, their lives have not improved. Their lives have not improved. No matter how much the IMF will talk about the macroeconomics and how the debt has gone down to 60% or what maybe is now down to 58 or 56%, I don't know. But it's in that region. It's hovering in that region. I don't care how much the IMF wants to talk about that. And people will say, but haven't you read the data? The data doesn't mean anything to me if it is adulterated data. And much of the data is adulterated. It's not true. It doesn't represent the true reality of the people's lives and their suffering. All you have to do is to drive the length and breadth of Jamaica to see the desperation. Right? The state of our roads already say that we are desperate. People raiding KFC to get a meal suggests a free meal. I think I don't know. Was it a free meal? I don't know what it was. But what it told me is that our economy is under duress. Our economy is under duress. And when you look at the people and the anger and the suffering that is written all over their faces, the desperation, the destitution, you have to say the politics have failed us. The politics in Jamaica have failed us for the last 63 years. Now we're approaching 63. And what can we say about the politics of Jamaica? Not much. Not much. And I'm not suggesting that we haven't had some decent politicians, right? And some who have tried. Some who have tried. I think the virtual white ones, these people are very silent, but it is a job to the best that he could, given the constraints that he had. And I'm sure there are a retinue of other great Jamaican politicians who have done their best. But the system is what needs to be first unmasked and then changed or transformed. It needs to be transformed. I think what we're doing, we're looking at the symptoms. When we're dealing with Jamaica, we tend to look at the symptoms of the problem while not looking at the root cause or the root causes of our problem, which is the system. The political system in Jamaica is flawed. And that is why we need, as they're suggesting, constitutional reform, but constitutional reform has to begin first with the economic inequities, the social inequities, the linguistic challenges we have there, and whether or not we are a nation or we're just made up of warring tribes. That is what we have to first. And I think the patois is the language, is that vernacular that keeps our citizens as warring tribes. If we were able to now to forge a language and say this is the language of all Jamaicans, and we don't care if it's a colonial language, once a language that, because language cannot be colonial, it depends on the way that you use it. The Creole can be colonial too. The Creole is a colonial language too. I told you that. It was formed here. It was formed in Africa. So the Creole, the Jamaican vernacular, is a colonial language as well. We have borrowed a lot of words from English, haven't we? From Spanish, from Portuguese, and from French. So what are we talking about? But that colonial language is not the language of the plantation. We want to use the language of the courts, the language of the Jamaican Parliament, okay, to be able to compete in the global village, in this global community. And we know it's already a very competitive global village because few resources, but lots of people. There are more dogs than bones. We know that. So if we're not competing well, if we're not equipping our people with the tools, including the linguistic tools, to be able to function competitively in this global economy, in this global village, then we are not going to succeed in national development. We cannot, will not succeed in building that country called Jamaica. Now, there's an article here written by, I think it's, and I did invite her or him. I don't know if it's a him. It's Peachin, a him or her. I think she's written some, she tends to write for the Jamaica Observer, and she writes some very interesting letters to the editor, and sometimes some good articles too. I think she publishes for both papers, if I'm not lying. But, Pete Chin here suggests, dear editor, to the Observer, a recent Don Anderson poll showed that 76% of respondents supported term limits for councillors and members of parliament, while 78% also believed prime ministers should serve for a predetermined period. According to the poll, younger respondents in particular support term limits. They're obviously more in tune with the times. The favorability of term limits for elected officials is a growing trend in many democracies. Prime Minister Dr. Andrew Holness campaigned on this in 2016. In fact, it was prioritized for the first 100 days. So Andrew Holness said that he would have actually had that term limit in 100 days. He must have changed his mind. We know it is not easy to let go of power, which is why term limits matter. Why don't they want to let go of power? Because power corrupts and it gives them access to loads of money. So when they're telling you that they are doing you a favor by accepting the paltry sums of money that you're giving them as MPs, that is hogwash. That is hogwash because they know that they have access to endless resources, financial and political, whatever resources, they do have access to all of that. So they want to remain in power. Perhaps the most important consideration for term limits is that public officials, have direct access to large sums of money. The limits help to reduce the risk of corruption and mismanagement, right? And it is this being in office for a long time that has corrupted our politicians. After a while, they love the adoration that they get from the Jamaican people. Wow, they are adored. Whatever they want, they will get because I'm my prime minister. I'm Femi prime minister that. I'm going to do anything for the prime minister. I'm my prime minister that. And this sort of cult-like personality that we see our politicians portraying, in which they cast political spells. And that's what they do. They cast political spells on our people, that our people can't see that our politicians are flawed creatures. Our politicians are flawed creatures just like any of us. Right? They're not gods. They are ordinary men and women like yourselves, and they should be your political servants, not your political gods or demigods, as you have made them into being, and you need to stop doing. But I don't know how much I'm going to come here and preach, how long I will have on this platform. But I'm suggesting to you, and make sure you're liking the videos, you're subscribing to the channel, like the videos so that the videos can be shared on the platform. A lot of what I'm doing here, you're not going to get it. And many of you are going to wake up. You are going to wake up. And it is going to be too late when you shall have awoken, because you think what you're hearing in the media in Jamaica, from independent sources, from the mainstream media, you think that that is true. Okay? And you don't understand that we have a rotten political machinery in Jamaica. A rotten political machinery. I am not sure that it can be made whole. Right? I'm not sure. It's a permanent leprosy that we have there. And I'm not sure what only the balm in Gilead can come and heal that hideous leprosy of politics that we see in modern Jamaica. So here we have the JLP, the PNP. They have lost their charm. They have lost their effect on the Jamaican people. People no longer, the PNP is no longer the party of the working class. The PNP is no longer the party of Michael Manley, of Norman Washington Manley. The PNP is no longer the party of the poor, of the Portuguese and Miller's poor. The JLP party is no longer the party of development, as they claim they are. What schools have they built? Look at the state of our schools and hospitals, with a few exceptions where you're modeling here and there, but that is not going to put us to this 21st century. We're still in the 19th century, the 20th century rather. We still find ourselves in the 20th century. Okay? So no matter what amount of patching and fixing up here and there, we need new modern facilities that are up to date, with modern equipment, with modern amenities. But that's too much to ask. You know, the other day, I'm not sure if it is true. I was looking at a TikTok video in which I saw some housing. Well, people say it's for the rich. I don't know if it's for the rich or for the middle class. You know, sometimes when a Caribbean or people say it's for the rich, they just mean for middle class people. It's not necessarily for the rich, you know. But that is how we express ourselves. People who can, you know, are middle class, we think that they're rich, and they're not rich because, you know, the Caribbean is poor. So people who can afford a better standard of living, they think that they're rich when they're just, you know, barely surviving. But, you know, they're living much better than the average Joe. So that's why they would think that they're rich. But I saw these houses that, you know, I see Jamaicans also building all these houses that they think that the teachers and other people will be able to buy. But these flat boxes, I would call them boxes. Why are we building these structures that are really not good for the landscape of Jamaica? When you look at what Georgetown, however, is doing, the houses are looking good. That's the sort of housing. I'm sorry I didn't, you know, have pictures here to show you what the housing look like. But this is the lack of vision that we have. We tend to, our politicians do the least amount of, they look down on our people. So Andrew Holness can go up there in Beverly Hills, right? And he can build his mansion in a short time. In a short period of time, Andrew Holness was able to acquire his mansion, even though he's complaining that he wasn't getting a big salary. Well, they're saying Juliet is in whatever she's in, right? She's an architect, whatever she is. Okay, so she has been able to generate all that funds. You know, it is sad. It is sad. While they're building, and I'm not saying that they have to build mansions like what Andrew Holness lives in for the common man. But if Andrew Holness wants prosperity, the common man wants prosperity too. Because he's a political servant. He's not better than the Jamaican people. Because we sent him there. Right? So they should have built some housing for teachers, from the class people, from the NHT, for people to live in that look decent. They don't have to, what I'm seeing them doing with all those boxes that I see, well, inside doesn't look bad, but it could be better, but I don't like the outside look. Secondly, when we have floods, when there are floods and these flat homes, these flat structures, are we even thinking about climate change? They like to talk about climate change, but when you think about the climate change and what they're doing, that's not going to be effective for climate change. Because if you have a flood tomorrow, the waters are going to rise and those people have to live with everything in the house is going to be destroyed. But that is my 2 cents. I had something here that I wanted you to listen to. And I think it was coming from what's his name? Dr. Andre Houghton. And I ended the video with here. Dr. Andre Houghton, who is a professor or lecturer of economics at the University of the West Indies. And he was talking about what he sees in Jamaica and the fact that the PNP is the only hope for Jamaica, according to him. Now, okay, let me just have you listen to what he says. I don't want to, becloud your minds with my analyses when you have a brain to think yourself. So listen, and then we can talk about what he said. And we end here, okay? Let me see if I can pull it back. All right, whatever.
Nationwide news too, because when Cliff Hughes talk about Christopher Tufton, oh, it's the best thing since sliced bread, oh, is it this, is it that? And then when we go on this program to talk, oh, it's because you're unpopular, where you come on the station, where it's like they approach them who are not doing anything with a positive mind. And us who mean the country so much, they try to infuse negative when they try to speak to us. And I don't like it. I don't like it. And that is the problem that we've had with a lot of these people who are not fair in how they go about discussing the business of the country. And those are the things that have held Jamaica back. And it will continue to hold us back if we don't hold these people accountable with their biased utterances.
It's interesting. This is coming from Dr. Andre Houghton. And this is the best analysis that a lecturer of the University of the West Indies, a lecturer of the economics, can render to the Jamaican people. That is a sign that our society has declined. That a professor, a lecturer, one who lectures students at the highest seat of learning, is not able to reflect, to give a more reflective analysis. And I'm sure he's going to be biased because he's a PNP. And yeah, I'm expecting him to show some bias because that's the party he belongs to. But does he think that just because, what's his name? Cliff Hughes is biased to the JLP, and he is. But the other media houses are also biased towards the PNP. So he should have been saying that, looking at the economy and saying that we need to do X, Y, Z, and what policies that he would implement as far as economics are concerned, should the PNP win office, and should they put him to become the finance minister. And if he were to become finance minister, if the PNP should win, what would Andre Houghton do? And Andre Houghton is an economics lecturer, a lecturer of economics. And look at how Andre Houghton is expressing himself. He's suggesting that, oh yeah, it's just, if we can get rid of Cliff Hughes being biased and nationwide, it would solve the problem of Jamaica. Wow. And the PNP is the only party that means Jamaica or Jamaicans well. Wow. This is coming from Dr. Andre Houghton. Now, look at the political maturity, on the other hand, whether she's sincere, and sometimes you don't know if Lisa Hannon is sincere. I don't know if she's sincere. She makes a lot of statements, and she was, and perhaps is still, a part of the political system. And she tends to be excoriating when she's outside of power, but when she's there, what was she doing? I don't know. But, at least she was able to say and to cite some important facts that the majority of our people are not confident with or in the political process. They're not. They don't believe neither in the JLP or Dr. Andrew Houghton, the PNP. So how could you be saying, are you reading these things, Andre Horton? Are you even reading the Gleaner? And what are the literature? What literature are you reading? Yeah, I don't know. Because if Andre Horton, a lecturer who has been there for some years now, he went there as a very young lecturer, I remember. And I think he should have shown now some intellectual maturity. Should be in his 40s. Okay? And this is what he has to say, right? This is what the professor has to say. Now, what is he professing at the University of the West Indies? What is he professing to his students? That the PNP is the best thing since sliced bread? And that they are the only party that will lift Jamaica out of the rot that we find ourselves in, when they have also contributed to the rot that we have found ourselves in? What is Dr. Andrew Horton, what is Dr. Andrew Horton suggesting? What is he trying to imply here? You will be the judge of Dr. Andre Horton's assertions. I leave that up to you. I think you're intelligent enough to decipher where we're going as a people. And when you see also others of the professors coming out of the University of the West Indies and their assertions on economics and or social problems or language problems, you really have to wonder, are these people just in ivory towers, totally detached from the realities of modern Jamaica? And they're just defending what they read in the textbooks and not being able to apply their understanding, their intellectual acuity, their intellectual capacity. I can't say intellectual brilliance, because if you're brilliant, then you should be able to look beyond the textbook. And I always hear Martin Henry saying to them, lift if they only would lift their heads outside of the textbook and attach themselves to the reality. I think our problems could be, to some extent, solved. But Jamaicans are not able to do that. They still are having themselves, their heads planted into textbook knowledge, which is not the real knowledge of the world. Right? We need the University of Jamaica, University of the streets, of University of the people. I think that is a university that will help to solve the problems of modern Jamaica. But at this juncture of our history, our people are not happy neither with the JLP nor with the PNP. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you like, share, and subscribe. Like the video so the videos can be shared with as many people on the platform. See you in another one. Ciao.